This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. Brought to you by Vigilant Impact. The Church Safety Guys is a nonprofit organization dedicated to equipping the vigilant, those men and women who stand watch, keeping our houses of worship and places of faith safe. We believe church safety and security must be a ministry first and have engaged, servant leaders who continually strive for excellence and teams of motivated volunteers that are always training. Join us for the next hour as the Church Safety Guys unpack safety, security, leadership, and ministry operations with your hosts, Dr. James McGarvey and Mike Scully. This broadcast is also available on YouTube, your favorite podcast platforms, churchsafetyguys.com, and on the original Church Security app. Download it today. Feel free to like, subscribe, and share with your ministry.
Well, hello and welcome to the Church Safety and Security broadcast with the Church Safety Guys. I am James, and once again, as we record this on another Sunday evening, joined my co-host, Mike.
How are you, James? Happy Sunday. Happy mid-October. I'm sitting here looking at the calendar, and I'm like, you know what? We're counting down to Halloween. We're counting down to Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I'm like, wondering where half the year went, because it feels like we were just together in Orlando, Florida, and here we are, and heck, even with our guest tonight, we were there, and yet now it's all of a sudden mid-October, and I'm like, how did that happen?
Well, and what's crazy about it is, I was looking at the calendar, and my calendar is already starting to fill up for January, February, and then
our conference in March.
The conference in March, we're going to be out in St. Louis, Missouri, and we'll have a couple of great guests with us, and it's going to be a good solid day. But yeah, I think this is the first time all weekend that I've actually sat down in my office in my chair, because I came flying in from my church tonight, and it's kind of funny because we'll message each other during the day, and I didn't think I was going to make it. I thought we were going to run long, so I'm like frantically driving and texting, which I shouldn't be, but I was texting Mike, and I'm like, I'm probably not going to make it. I might make it. Coming in hot.
Well, I mean, you know what? It's good that
stuff.
At least it's not me this time, because a lot of times with the young kids and everything else, I'm usually the one coming in hot last minute and joining up, and recording this on Sundays is usually good. Sometimes it can just be trouble trying to after a busy day. So glad you made it. Glad the meeting went well at church, and it's pretty crazy how the schedules have just seemingly. I know everybody talks about being busy, and it's like, but yet not busy to the extent where time just disappears. And that's where I feel is the stage we've reached. And I guess praise God, because God has other plans and wants to keep us busy and is giving us more and more work. So I guess that's a good thing.
For sure. Yesterday, I had the opportunity to spend some time with one of the local churches, and we were doing active shooter training and drills and that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I just, my weekend is, well, both of our weekends, it's like, it's always evaporating. It's like, oh, tomorrow's Monday, back to the regular scheduled work.
Yep. If only God had it so mapped out that this was our day job, it would be a little easier, but maybe someday. Sometimes. You never know.
Well, if this is the first time that you've joined us, or you haven't joined us for a while, welcome. As always, you can visit our website at churchsafetyguys.com for information and resources for your church. We also have the Church Security app, and that's available on Google and Apple platforms, so you can download that. That's free, thanks to our sponsors. And quick shout out for 2aradiocenter.com and Motorola, because we appreciate their partnership to make this happen, because all the stuff that happens in the background costs money. And fortunately, unfortunately, they have a vested interest in helping churches as well as we do. So we're happy that they partnered with us and help keep helping make sure the lights are on, right?
Yep. Well, I can't say from mine because my lights are off, but anyhow.
Mine are on though, so that's good. But yeah, so check out our website for resources, and there's also an up and coming list of events and scheduled appearances that we have, and trainings and different things like that on our website. We just opened up ticket sales for the St. Louis conference, so those are available. Fantastic price and rate for the day. It's an 8-hour day, and Mike and I will be there. Our guest tonight will be there, and then we'll also have John Riley with General Response. He'll be there as well, and some local folks. But I want to say, I believe it's $59 a ticket, and that also includes lunch. We've had, thanks to a generous sponsor, we've covered lunch for everybody. And so thanks to the church, it's going to be at the First Baptist Church of O'Fallon, Missouri, right outside on the west side of St. Louis. And fantastic folks, fantastic partners. And, they reached out to us and wanted to do some active church safety ministry in their community. And so they're leading the way and trying to bring in some quality folks for their ministry outreach. So they reached out to Mike, and no, they reached out to us and they said, "Hey, who can you guys come out with?" So we're looking forward to that. It'll be fun. It'll be a good conference after the holidays and whatnot. So I was going to say things are going to slow down and then we'll have that, but
no,
I've got a trip to Dallas and a few other things in between. So
it's not going to slow down. I mean, I know we were sitting there talking about this happening in March, and it felt like forever away. And now we're talking about it, and it's like showing up on our calendar with other events, both in front and behind it. And I'm like, okay, we're booking all the way into March for some things. That's not that far away. So it's come up around very quickly, and yeah, we're blessed to be able to go out that way, and thankful to that church, and exciting to bring our conference to another part of the country. And I mean, we've been in many different spots, but it's great. And I know there's folks clamoring to have us come west, and I know that we have invites in Texas and Arizona and other places, but always if you're interested in putting together a conference for your church, for your community, reach out, James or I, and we're happy to chat about what that looks like.
For sure. And we've got some great partnerships coming up on the horizon. We're at the moment, I'm working with Ohio Crime Prevention Association to add some fantastic content to some of their conferences. We've shared their conferences in Ohio lately, and so if you're listening and you're in the Ohio area or region, definitely check out our website, because we've got some great stuff coming up with that. We've got a new book coming out, Lord willing, in another week or so.
Again.
And that's going to be the 4 pillars of church safety and security. So, and we've got a few other resources coming out tied into that. So definitely a lot going on, and it doesn't slow down, or it doesn't seem to slow down, but it's all good. But anyhow, so on this broadcast, we're going to talk about handling at-risk youth. And oftentimes this month, or the last few broadcasts, we've talked about kids and youth and teens, and And the reason I really wanted to devote some time to it was because I really feel like that's a ministry that a lot of times we shy away from. And maybe it's because of the age difference, maybe because we get into this mindset that, it's youth and the youth leaders can take care of stuff that's going on. But, what happens when the youth ministry within the church has a security or safety issue? We need to be able to step in and address that and relate and connect with those folks. So with that, I will go ahead and bring our guest in, and that would be Mr. Dwayne Harris. So thank you, sir, for joining us, and welcome.
Welcome.
And can you hear us?
Look like we got some technical difficulties. We see you. Are you there? You're not showing mute on our side.
No, for some reason we can't hear you.
We're still not getting you. Yeah.
I'm not sure what's up with the mic connection. We heard you a second ago.
We did.
So
we'll give it a second. We'll try to get back in here. I was going to say we haven't had any bugs in a while, but here we go. Still no audio there, Dwayne.
I'm looking at my side and everything looks good, so I'm not sure. Okay. Well, he'll probably jump back in and see. We'll see. But anyhow, so we can jump into the topic anyway and talk about it, and and get rolling, and hopefully we can get his mic issue squared away, and we can bring him back in and kind of go from there. So anyhow, so that was the reason that I wanted to talk about that. Let me see. He's in the background here. Let me see if I can bring him in.
There we go.
There we go. Cool. All right. So welcome.
No, Verizon
again.
is not a sponsor.
Yeah, I thought that was some kind of joke. I thought that was just like a mute trick or something I wasn't aware of.
So welcome.
Not quite yet.
Not yet.
Cool. Let me bump you up a little bit. All right. Awesome. So what let's jump right into it. So what are your thoughts on, Dwayne, what are your thoughts on handling at-risk youth and from a safety and security perspective with youth groups and that sort of thing in the church?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously with any ministry, I think when you're talking about from the safety and security aspect, trying to kind of look through all of your ministry programs and kind of identifying what are the things that kind of have increased our risk. What are the things that we need to kind of wrap around or integrate our safety concepts into. Obviously, our children's ministries and our youth ministries are going to be way up there on that priority list. So I think the key is for most ministries that they have a youth program is just understanding how they can integrate, maybe start to involve some training to get a little bit better ingrained in those ministry programs so that there's adequate supervision. I think your supervision, your screening, your safety concepts, all those things that we already do in a lot of other aspects of church safety and security, we have to find ways to integrate that. Many times we just have security. You'll walk around and think that, well, if I'm just doing site observation while they're functioning in their youth or children's ministry, then that's safety. I'm here to tell you that it's not. That's going to be inadequate.
Sure.
So we have to find ways to actually integrate safety concepts into those programs, meaning that the staff has awareness, that we're helping to help the staff learn what to recognize, how to just kind of integrate it, and to learn the youth, to learn the children that's attending their programs, and to try to identify stuff early on so that we can better assist.
For sure. I think you mentioned background checks, and I think that's another area too. that I've had a lot of conversation. I know Mike has too, but I've had a lot of conversations with churches and have said, that's a very minimal thing to say, look, you know what, if you're placing an adult with youth or with individuals, they need to be at least screened and checked, to have some type of layer of extra security in there, to say at very minimum, to say, okay, this person doesn't have anything in their background. And a lot of times I've had people say, well, I don't need that because I know them, or I know that person forever. And I've known that person forever. But the truth of it is, even with the background check, that doesn't mean that everything's okay. I mean, we still have an obligation to pay attention to what's going on and have checks and balances within that ministry and make sure that there's certain levels of accountability. So
100%. I like what you said there, Dwayne, with integrate. I think two words that are really heavy for me is integrate and collaborate. Is these, as ministries, we really want to make sure that we're reaching across that aisle between us, that the wall, if you will, between ministries, just to make sure that we're saying, hey, you know what, we're not trying to tell you how to do your job. You're not trying to tell us how to do ours, but how can we figure out ways to work together? And I like the word integrate. I think that makes a whole lot of sense, is that there's security needs for youth and for kids ministry, but there's also concerns that working with kids, working with those that are considered at risk, those that are identified that having at risk within the community itself already, your community as far as the church goes, it's important at that point to have a way to have built a relationship strong enough with those other staff members, those other leaders, so that they're perhaps sharing that information. Hey, I heard about such and such or so and so, and you know what? You want them to come forward voluntarily and make you as security team aware of what's happening, so that we as a safety and security team, we're there to mitigate risk. So when you're looking at a youth that may be in a situation that is at greater risk, well, knowing about that is important because they're subject to different triggers and people and things like that we've seen in the past. I mean, heck, we just talked last week with the idea that those that tend to fall prey and to become a victim are those that perhaps are already vulnerable. And so I
yeah.
think in that sense is that they're not just somebody to pay attention to as a protector. There's somebody to pay attention to so that they're not influenced negatively and they don't necessarily go down the wrong path, because that could boil over. That could have something that has ramifications or spillover within your youth group. That could be something that is going on at home that they bring into church with them, and that boils over there. There's a lot of different areas, but again, it comes back to, are we building that relationship? Are we creating the right opportunity to collaborate with these other ministries?
For sure. And I think, honestly, I think looking at everything, we know from an adult standpoint, we know that adults, especially with mental health concerns, bring in that baggage and bring in problems and different things to church. So it really, realistically, to your point, Mike, I mean, it's not a far stretch to say that teens are dealing with a lot too, and
Right.
youth are dealing with a lot, and they're bringing that in. And so we, to a certain degree, we have a responsibility and obligation to oversee what's happening with that ministry as well.
Yep.
And, the children's ministry or a different type of ministry within the church, we might be able to easily control what's happening because of the age or because we're controlling the environment, right? So the environment the kids are in, we're able to tweak that. But
Right.
when you get to the youth age, and the age of teens, you can't always control that environment because, the environment encompasses and encapsulates life outside of the church. So it's not just this 1 hour or 2 hours that you get to see that person, in that. So it's certainly harder and they don't typically, I mean, there's usually, most churches have a youth night, youth group night, that sort of thing.
Right.
But you're not typically going to see interaction with adults like you necessarily would with on the same level as teens. So
For sure.
we'll
I
bring
think
back
if we
in.
back up and kind of say, you know what, if we look at even defining at risk, I mean, I know different folks kind of define it in different ways. To me, when it's at risk, I may not define it the way that others do. I look at it as saying, hey, you know what, everybody's vulnerable. To some degree, we're all at risk in different cases. It's just elevated risk. And maybe I'll toss that your way, Dwayne.
Yeah, and I apologize. So I'm kind of in and out, obviously. So I'm catching the
It's
back of
all
the
good.
conversation. So I was still on thought one, and you guys have already moved off to thought two. So I apologize for that. If I could, and I'll answer that, but if I could just kind of circle back just 1 second,
Sure.
when we were talking about screening, because I think identifying those at-risk youth and kind of really identifying what we're looking at and what are some of the needs that we need to be safeguarding towards. When we talk about screening, a lot of times, especially in like children's or youth ministries, we talk about the adults getting the background checks and obviously those that we're putting around our minors. But a lot of times what we don't consider is the peer-to-peer. So a lot of times the greatest actual risk to harm inside a program is not going to probably be from a rogue volunteer or somebody that's infiltrated your screening system and now is integrated into the program to to manipulate it for self gain. Not to say that that wouldn't happen, because it does, but I think the peer to peer threat or the peer to peer risk that you have individuals that may be coming in and flowing into your program that may have underlying issues. I mean, not everybody comes from the same structure of living, and so you have some people that may have underlying substance abuse issues, people who have may underlying mental health concerns. And so it's also just equally as important for your staff, especially your youth ministers and your children's ministers, to have intentional interactions with those who attend. And although you may not be running a background check, by simply doing things like taking documentation on emergency contact list, developing everything you can for a known on those who attend. So by inquiring, what is the home structure? Well, sometimes it's kind of hard to have that conversation, but if you're having a standard emergency contact list that has some standard questions that allow you to grasp that, where's your residence? Do you have one or two guardians? Kind of identifying that family structure. There's a lot of people in some of these youth ministries, they'll just invite a teen, invite a friend, and yeah, we want to welcome people into ministry. Obviously we want to open up the doors, but for the safety of your program, we have to be basically interacting and screening by just gathering information that we can on everybody who comes in and integrates. So if somebody comes in because you had a basketball night, but now they've integrated in and you don't know that they don't have a home structure, they're not going to provide any information. Those are the kind of things that you want to know so you can start building that safety profile around other youth.
Well, and to your point too, that's an excellent point of building that safety profile. But you never know when you're going to get spillover from a situation at someone's home. And to be perfectly honest, I mean, we're dealing with that with one of my daughter's friends right now, that they have kind of a unique situation at home, and it's spilling into the place where several of the pastors have had to get involved and say, okay, let's help this family. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it I think sometimes in our haste to look at what's most eye-catching and most dramatic, like the parents having a disagreement, a lot of times that's eye-catching, right? Because we see that sometimes it's more dramatic. But then when we look at the kids, sometimes we forget that the kids are experiencing that and working through that too. And bringing them into that environment, like Mike and I mentioned before, a lot of times, they don't have a way to vent or to be concerned about it. So they vent to their peers and their friends, and they bring that spillage into the youth group and, and everything else as they're trying to navigate it. So.
Yeah,
And
and I think go ahead, Mike.
well, in a way, where I like what you're saying there, Dwayne, is really screening is really an interview. It's you're listening more than you're talking, but you're also probing a bit. But what we're really also looking for is, do these kids have resilience? And if so, what is it from? Do they have baggage? Do they have this? Do they have these things going on? What level of resilience do they have? What sort of uh, uh, frustrations or other sorts of things going on in their lives currently? Because we want to understand, okay, is this going to be something that is going to come to a head here? Is there something going on even within the ministry itself? Because uh, hurt people, obviously, so you never know what can actually happen even within the ministry. And you're right, that peer-to-peer was a great point. We're so often talking about it from that outsider becoming an insider, but in reality, it can be that peer. It can be somebody who's bullying or is jealous or has just a different power structure feeling, and takes it out on another. And it's hard to see that when we may or may not even be operating during that youth night, when we may not always be there or rotating. Staff's far and few between as far as coverage. So it's pulling in all the information that we possibly can and making sure that we're truly kind of consuming that and adding to that profile.
Yeah, and we've said this before on here. I know we've all talked of it in discourse. The greatest tool for safety inside the ministry is hospitality. So it's twofold. It's not just hospitality because it gives us the chance to interact with people. It's actually ministry. So imagine that you can actually have a safety concept that can actually be used in ministry. So hospitality says I interact with you because I care and I want to know. But with what I know and with that interaction, I now can create safety avenues and safety nets inside the program. So it's not just even so much about, but by the youth workers finding the systems. And sometimes we have to create. Not everybody looks through the same lens of safety. Not everybody's going to see things through the security viewpoint that maybe we do. But we do need to teach them to see systems. And if they'll see the systems, they'll be able to identify stuff that otherwise they wouldn't have identified to report to us. So by having those screening sheets, by having those basically get to know you sheets, they're learning how to better help and to assist that minor, that juvenile coming into the program. What underlying needs do they have? Now it shows that I care about them, and at the same time we're able to kind of start to pick up on some of that information. So hospitality is the key to safety. It really is. Information is the key to safety. And when you can integrate, then the next thing is within that same system of safety of having programs so that when people visit and come in, we collect basic information. Well, that's liability protection for us, because if somebody's gathered on our, if they're a minor, does the parent, the guardian even know that they're attending? If they was to have an accident, to have some kind of issue that would occur while playing in a sporting event that you've hosted on site, okay, do they know that? Have they given some kind of consent to that? So having those systems of safety, but also starting to develop that safety net, because like you said, James, sometimes somebody coming in, it's kind of how they integrate maybe their lifestyle, what they're dealing with, their issues kind of come in. So you have to have those same systems. So like we do in children's programs, where you have certain areas to where gathering is monitored. So juveniles, they know how to get out of sight, out of mind. And so you have to not only have check-in systems and sign-in systems, but you really got to have that security profile to make sure that you have designated areas, that you have areas that are isolated for where they can visit, where they can go. You have protocol that we don't let two go walking off down a hallway together into, and trying doors to see what room they can get into. So you really have to help your youth ministry staff and children's staff build in systems so that they're aware, and you just kind of help them to micromanage some of the safety concerns that could be present in those types of ministries.
I want to pull it a slightly different direction as well, is in the senses that when we're probing and putting those questions out there, or impressing upon our youth leaders to gather this information, we want to make sure that they're also balancing that need for creating a safe space for those youth to understand that they don't feel like they're going to clam up and not talk, or that they're just being grilled or interviewed or screened. And so it's a delicate balance between what our job is, obviously, to manage that risk, but also as a youth leader, what they're doing. And I love the word care, Dwayne, is that's really what it is
Yeah.
folks and youth really at the end of the day, they want to know that you care. And if you can show that in any possible way, you're going to open that up a little bit to find out a bit more about them. So we want to make sure that that youth leader is creating that safe space, but also and being honest, and not necessarily, but also sitting there saying, hey, you know what, I'm not here to just kind of tell on anything you share with me, but of course, if there's certain things going on, I'm going to have to inform other people. And so it's establishing that honesty and transparency and trust right up front, and creating that space where they can share the information.
Yeah, and like you said, finding, just as Jesus did with the disciples, he knew each of them and their unique patterns. He knew when he brought them in, he knew their identities, he knew where they came from, and he tailored ministry and experiences to each of them to make sure that they were able to receive, the truth of the gospel. So it's the same thing, like you said, with youth. We never give up safety by doing ministry. In fact, the better you are at doing ministry, the safer you are, because true ministry is that engagement. And through that engagement, people. So ultimately, we're assisting them and we're helping them. And so if there are risks, we're helping them to identify them even in themselves and helping them to see Christ as the solution to that. So, yeah, integration, care, hospitality, all those things, safety, you don't have to just stand back in a corner and put on an ID and block stuff down to get safety across. Actually, you have to break that down, and you have to integrate yourself through hospitality and care. That's a phenomenal point, Mike.
I think just to jump on that real quick, we had a situation too, and give the illustration. My middle daughter, and I can disclose this story because she doesn't listen to our broadcast at all. But otherwise, she'd probably, I don't know, complain about it. But anyhow, my middle daughter actually has her friends come over and they do a Bible study in our living room. They've done that for a long time. And she started it. Like, she reached out to her friends and said, hey, come on over. Let's do this Bible study. And at one point in time, one of the girls really struggled with some LGBTQ type situation. And I'm not going to go into all of that. But what was interesting to me was that she made the choice to stop coming to the Bible study and to pull out of the youth group. And so what was interesting was, my daughter came to my wife and I and said, hey, she's pulled out, she stopped coming. She seems to think like there's this perception at the youth group that she's mad at me. And I said, well, why would she be mad at you? We're just you're literally just hosting a Bible study, and the Bible study was guided. Like, they were working through a curriculum, so it wasn't even anything said or anything like that. And so, come to find out that apparently, and this I don't know, multiplied over time. And so eventually it kind of broke loose with the parents being upset at my wife and I, because they felt like we were the ones to blame for pushing their daughter out and to encourage their daughter to leave the youth group. And I'm like, I finally ended up having to go to the other dad and have a conversation and say, can you just explain to me what's going on here? Like, I don't understand how inviting your child over to my house for a Bible study, how that translates to me making your child leave the church. And so, I mean, there's always, obviously there's always a lot of drama, but with that situation, I guess my point and my reason for bringing it up is that you never know, like, where you're going to get connected, like with your kids in that situation, and how that's going to expand and go into something that's more concerned or concerning. These other parents that had an issue with us, instead of coming to us and saying, hey, I'm kind of concerned, or I'm upset about this or that, then went to other avenues around the church and everything, and started basically telling people that we were making kids like my wife and I were making kids leave the church. because of this whole situation with their daughter. And we're like, wait a second, this started out as my daughter just saying, hey, I want to encourage my friends and have a Bible study. And it just morphed into this whole massive thing where it was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, well, I think very quickly. I mean, we all know that God's not the author of confusion, and anytime you do ministry, you're going to have opposition. You're going to have offense come. I think we just have to navigate and walk through that. I think making that attempt to make contact, to get clarity, and to help communicate truth face to face is key. And that's and
sure.
That's a great example right there with that in the youth. But that's one of many topics. That's one of many things. that can come up in youth ministry. I mean, let's just be honest. There's so many dynamic contacts and things that can come up to where people can say, hey, that's a hot topic. Hey, that is right there. We have a preference to that. So, I think that communication, keeping that open line of communication, building those deep relationships with the youth is essential. And like you said, with your daughter, it's integrating youth into the program. So a lot of times you'll see ministries where they'll have people get to the high end of the ministry cutoff point, and sometimes they'll stay after and they'll help maybe the new people coming in from the junior high to kind of integrate into the program. But it's having people who know how to do ministry, how to do that one-on-one, how to help people and assist people, and finding people. In a youth group, you'll find a lot of diversity, and that's a beautiful thing, because that diversity allows you to find people who can identify other issues and other children who are coming in and find ways to minister to them. So that integration, gives that information, but definitely dealing with that communication concept, because that's one of the greatest liability things right there in youth ministry is just so-and-so said the so-and-so said, and we thought it was this. And next thing you know, the confusion becomes dominant over reality. But
it really leads in.
Oh, sorry. Real quick, just to wrap that up, and I'll throw it over to you, Mike. Sure. I will say that the cool thing about it is, because those kids have been in our home, like because we opened our home up, I certainly know them better than I would, the other kids that don't come into my home, because as parents, we're involved. Obviously, we're involved with our kids and what they're doing and stuff. And it's developed for us. It's been a blessing, because it's helped us develop a relationship with our daughter. When something's not right, she feels comfortable in coming and talking to us and saying, and there's been several, and I've shared previous stories, safety stories concerning the whole church before on our broadcast, where individuals have gone to her and said, or come to me and said, hey, I heard this person's doing something that's just not safe. And, I trust you. I know you're the safety director. Can you help? Because they understand that there's a serious concern there. So does it work? Is the drama frustrating? Absolutely. But does it help and build stuff? Well, yeah. I mean, in this case, I felt like it was a blessing, and it did. So, Mike, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I was going to you're kind of hitting on a piece of it there, Dwayne, is when we're working with these kids or caught up in a situation where we're brought in as a safety security team, either to be informed or worse, in some sort of direct engagement way, we're working with kids that, A, they're kids, B, many of them are suffering from insecurity, shame, fear, jealousy, hurt, and they don't necessarily have the resilience or the coping mechanisms to navigate this. And I think that's where we're almost, in ways, we're trying to help understand. So I think seeking to understand, seeking to put ourselves in their shoes and try to say, hey, they're trying to navigate without a compass in some cases, because they haven't invented it yet for themselves. And so they're not necessarily coming at this in a bad way. They're just coming at it without direction. And so our job is really to help kind of provide that and humble ourselves to realize that, okay, it's not just that they're not yet adults. They're future adults. They're learning. If we handle them with the gloves of saying, let's be educators, let's have empathy for where they're at, and let's try to figure out how we can make them feel comfortable.
Yeah. And if you look at just statistics, and you look, especially here after the last, the COVID with the 2-year shutdown, and you look at how that's impacted children. So there's youth that grew up that never went to their prom. There's group they've never got to experience certain sporting events and things that were very a driving factor for them. So you got to think about how their life has been impacted here, and not just to mention some of the dishevelment that came from COVID, but just look at just the cultural shifts, the influence, the peer pressure inside the school system. So we know that National Institute for Mental Health says 1 in 4 people suffer from a mental illness, but in minors and in juveniles over the last 2 years, they say that number's almost increased to 50. So 50% of juveniles and youth in adolescent age are trying to learn how to cope and how to deal with things. And so the stressors of life are just creating a lot greater of an impact on them. So the ability and the need to really talk to minors, to really ask them, you can't just sit there and come into a ministry and preach and prod and put something out there and expect them to grab onto it. You really have to know and kind of listen. And like you said, get to hear what it is, or what are they struggling with? What are they dealing with? And then you got to realize that sometimes when you have those uneasy conversations, you get uneasy answers. So,
Right.
Asking people, but they say almost 25% of minors or adolescents between 15 and 18 have actually thought about and contemplated suicide. Now you say, well, the number is probably not really that high, but I'm here to tell you, in a culture where the discussion of those topics and the ability to hear people who are suffering from depression, experiencing the strain and trying to grow up and to navigate the stresses of life at this early age, where they're trying to develop, and culture's pushing more down their throat than we had ever seen. Those are true numbers, and so we have to be aware of that, and we have to be looking for ways to integrate, to find out what their greatest needs are, and then find a way to minister from that point.
Absolutely. And I think that takes us right into, really, I think, an opportunity for us is that our teams really need to have training that is beyond procedural. Yes, we need empathy. We need to understand how to work with kids. And so that doesn't come overnight, and at one end, it's just basic human relation. It's also understanding kids, and those that don't have kids may not fully understand it yet. And so you may have a younger member of your team that doesn't have kids, that, they may not fully grasp what they need to. On the far end, you may then have those that have had grown kids. And so they've realized and grown themselves through that process. But I think also what we're seeing is, as a result of stressors, as a result of other risks and triggers, is really a need for additional training, probably around conflict resolution, anger management, really those areas.
Yeah. There's a lot of great programs that's out there. So if you look at just mental health first aid for juveniles, there's a lot of different courses that are nationally recognized that are great, easy to get into program for people who just want to kind of give of themselves as on their own time, to kind of look into some local trainings that they could probably find. That's one that's probably readily available out there. But I would say, trying to educate ourselves, trying to learn how to better recognize things in our youth. And I would say, and sometimes I think youth workers get it, those who are trying to reach youth, but sometimes as security or people who work from the outside, we look at juveniles, and the problem is we treat them like juveniles. But here's the funny thing: is juveniles don't recognize that they're juveniles. Right. Juveniles think they're adults, and so I always kind of give an example. Sometime if I came into a classroom and I'm teaching, and I asked everybody, hey, when you came into the class, great to see you, but do me a favor, hand your phone up real quick. In my classroom, I just prefer people not to have a cell phone, and have everybody turn it in. They'd be like, what kind of class is this? But if you go and you see a juvenile in crisis, and the juvenile has a phone, you ask them, well, what are you doing with the phone? Well, you need to turn your phone in. Yeah, well, get over it. We expect juveniles to be treated like juveniles, but in essence, they think they're adults. And so no adult would want to be treated that way. And I think a lot of times we harm ourselves by the way we interact with juveniles, to where we can actually be a shutoff point
Yeah.
As opposed, and remember that the key to safety is information. And so I'm not saying everybody has the gift of gab, but we need to learn to build that rapport. Number one, because we care and we're the extension of Christ. So we're ministry first. If you're in safety, you're ministry first. That's just what it is. But you have to build that rapport because safety relies on information, and without interaction and you don't get the intel, you don't get the information. So, we just have to remember who we are, but we have to also understand what our purpose is. And so, do some safety concepts, but they don't need a big brother. Sometimes they just need somebody to spend the time to talk to them and to integrate and to interact with them and find out what are their greater needs.
Absolutely.
For sure. I think a lot of times too, we tend to jump the gun, like you said, and kind of forget that that they might not have a completely developed train of thought and logic, but they
don't
probably, yeah. But then I know quite a few adults that don't.
There you go.
Sometimes I wonder about myself on a regular basis.
Yeah, there you go.
But so besides, jumping into the what can we actively do to make this situation or make a situation better? I know certainly de-escalation can come up, like getting some de-escalation training and understanding, like you mentioned, understanding how to communicate and how to talk to youth. What are some other thoughts that you might have on that?
Well, I think like I mentioned, the mental health first aid, I think trying to identify, because like I said, 1 in 4 people have an underlying mental health condition. And many times in youth, there's so many circumstances that they may face, incidents of abuse at the household. Maybe they're witnessing a parent who's strung out and addicted to drugs. Well, statistics show us that for somebody who's growing up in a household where a parent is strung out on drugs, they're 80% more likely to get involved in illicit or criminal behavior. So the things that they're experiencing, that's why it's so important to really have that integration model. So you really have to train staff. Hey, it's great to do ministry, but you need to understand what we're trying to reach and who we're trying to reach and our target audience, and finding out some of the underlying issues inside your community by your integration with your law enforcement. But trying to identify some of those underlying issues that they may have. And so, like I said, mental health first aid is a course that is pretty much available throughout various states and areas. Those are the courses that are easy to get into that give the student tools on how to better interact. How to identify signs of depression, how to ask. So many times we're talking to somebody, if they say they're struggling with pain, they're cutting, they're doing different things. That's very common. Ask a true youth minister who's been doing youth ministry for any period of time, who hasn't had interaction with a youth who's been in crisis. Okay, they have. The problem is sometimes we look beyond that because we say in ministry we just have this one answer, the answer of Christ, and yes, He is the answer. But you have to understand what people suffer with. And be willing to have that conversation with them. So I think training that deals with the de-escalation is a phenomenal component. It helps to integrate some safety concepts and how you can interact with people. But having the ability to recognize underlying conditions, anxiety, depression, those are all real components that many of the youth and those who are entering into our programs are suffering with. So we need to have those open conversations with them, incorporate it through your ministry, incorporate it through the sermon series, incorporate that through the peer base. So when you have people that's come into your ministry program who said, hey, I used to cut, I used to try to find ways to kind of deal with the pain of the brokenness at my household. Let them get up, let them share testimonies, let them become a talking point. So now I'm not saying that you're normalizing that, but what you're doing is you are normalizing the fact that Christ can reach us all. So it doesn't matter where you come, what you bring in. Guess what? Christ is an answer. He's a solution. But if you'll find that now that other person inside that youth program, peer to peer, because remember, it's a phenomenal thing to be able to minister and to lead and to guide people. But peer to peer ministry and peer to peer influence is really the greatest impact inside of youth ministry. So finding people who have suffered and dealt with things and found their way to get resolution through Christ, letting them share that, make that part of that ministry experience. Like-minded people will gravitate towards them, and they'll get that peer to peer one-on-one. That's going to be a phenomenal component to healing and restoration.
That's big. I had a thought. I'm not going to be able to follow that as well, but it was a thought really around, we have sometimes policies in our church, and it can be perhaps even some churches have things that are dress code driven, or how these kids are, perhaps they're craving the opportunity of individuality, uniqueness, and they're expressing themselves in certain ways. We got to make sure our policies aren't creating an environment that pushes them away. We need to make sure that we're not just literally black and white and enforcing a policy for the sake of creating some sort of picturesque environment that someone thinks is the right way to go about doing church, when in reality we want to make sure that we're supporting positive self-expression for these youth.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. Yeah, I think having the procedures, we have to have procedures, but like you said, we have to be open-ended to be able to receive people, so that we can minister to them. I would say that the greatest things in maybe the written procedures and the processes that come into play for your youth and juvenile would just be your supervision models, integrating things to where they have set areas where they come in, they have set information, that they fill out sheets, that they show that they came and participated in activities, getting that emergency contact list, having designated areas throughout your facility. If you take little stand-up post or whatever and put isolated areas, let them know boundaries, start to develop hubs to where when they come into that area, supervision naturally takes place on its own, because nobody's wandering down hallways. So you really just have to have supervision models, because a lot of times youth ministers, they're there to reach people, and if you just let them just bring in the program, you'll have them given everything. Sky's the limit to the youth minister trying to reach the target audience. But if you'll integrate safety bubbles around that ministry, you're safeguarding that ministry leader. At the same time, you're safeguarding those who gather on your campus, and really allowing them to kind of self-monitor each other through the systems that you put in place. So I'd say developing those systems, overseeing your program, integrating with your ministry leads, having those contacts. They should know who the security person is. They should feel comfortable on what they can share and what to bring up. Peer-based leaders should know when they should be identifying things that need to be talked about and discussed and shared as well. So I think just the training component.
For sure.
And then I realized, James, I don't know if there was one more question that you wanted to field, but because of the technical difficulties at the beginning of the hour, we really never actually let Dwayne introduce himself to our audience.
Oh, it's a little late for that.
I can bring a little bit in now and give some background to it.
Yeah,
so give us some context.
Yeah, that's fine. I appreciate it. So, my name's Dwayne Harris. I'm with Full Armor Church. In case you didn't know that. So, yeah, I'm with Full Armor Church. So I work in law enforcement. I also work in ministry. I've served in ministry for 26 plus years, and been in law enforcement for 20. So as you guys do as well. Learned how God knows how to marry kind of your purpose with your ministry. So, over the last, I'd say 6-7 years, been assisting ministries in their safety training. 2017, we launched Full Armor Church. So we provide church safety curriculum and materials for ministries, and go on site and do church safety awareness training. And we've partnered with you guys. Phenomenal ministry. We love your heart. Love y'all's scope and focus for safety. And I love the technical glitches. Let's just be honest.
Well, I was thinking every time you come on, we have a technical glitch. So I'm wondering if it's a spiritual thing now.
It may be.
It could be. No, it's great to be have you part of the not only the show, but obviously helping alongside with Full Armor and our ministry, and coming out to our conferences and things like that. We're blessed to have you be able to speak at different events, and there's just a whole lot where I think James and I can speak for him in saying is that we enjoy and make sure that we surround ourselves with smart, educated, and ministry and Christ first people, because that's what this is about. I mean, in fact, everything our next book really epitomizes as far as who we are as an organization comes from making sure that we have that right influence, that right inspiration around us, and why what we call it internally is iron sharpens iron. And that to us is important, because we want to make sure that what put out on air, what we in our books, what we're saying in person at our conference is inspired and is influenced in the right way, and not just out of a modern day influencer picture, which we know we're influencing folks. We know, but we don't actually take that label on in such a way that says, hey, we're not going to become that negative, because we're going to surround ourselves with the better positive influence.
Yeah, agreed. Well, we definitely love and appreciate the partnership that we've had and built. Have the utmost in confidence and the undergirding of the approach that you guys take to church safety and security. So it's awesome to be part of it.
Good stuff.
Cool.
James, I'll leave it to you.
Well, we definitely appreciate you joining us despite the technical glitches tonight. So thanks so much, and we're definitely looking forward to having you join us in March. So I'm looking forward to that. It'll be a lot of fun.
Amen, brother.
All right.
Good to see you, sir.
All right.
We'll go ahead and wrap up real quick. So next week, I think if I can get a hold of her in her crazy schedule, we're going to be talking with Dia Simpkins, who is our Brotherhood Mutual rep. So we're going to be talking about insurance and dealing with youth ministries and children's ministries, and kind of wrap up our segment on that as well. But hopefully that'll work out, because I was talking to her on the phone the other day, and Dia is always like going 100 miles at once. Yep. So I'm like, oh, hey, I was calling her about my church's insurance. Like, I had a question for her, and then I said, oh, hey, by the way, are you still good for coming on the broadcast? And she's like, oh, absolutely. Just send me a email reminding me. So I'll probably do that tomorrow. But anyhow, so thanks for hanging out with us. Hopefully this conversation was beneficial. And as always, you can reach out to us through our website at churchsafetyguys.com or through the Church Security app. And we would love to help you in your ministry however we can. And again, if you have training concerns or there's something that we can help you with, visit our website and you can reach out, and we'll do our best to help you with it. So other than that, Mike, did you want to add anything?
No, I think it's great. Another great episode. And you know what I really wanted to comment is, now that we're a couple episodes in here, I do really appreciate the story arc of staying in the youth and kids element more than a single episode. I think it's allowed us to kind of go deeper and unpack some things and pull out some gold nuggets that it's tougher to do when we only hit on this topic a couple times a year. So it's been really good to kind of explore this in with different guests in different ways. So it's been eye-opening. So that's good.
Absolutely. And if you like, we base our schedules and our broadcasting schedules and topics solely on what you guys ask for. So again, I mean, if you reach out to us and you're like, hey, you guys haven't talked about this or that. I mean, we look at our calendar and we try and pull up topics that we haven't talked about. I think in November, we've got another topic on fire prevention coming up. We haven't talked about that in a while. Preparing for the holidays, special events, different things like that. And then also we're going to do another one on situational awareness and body language. But realistically, if there's a topic that you would like us to talk about, please reach out to us and shoot us an email or message us on Facebook and say, hey, you guys haven't talked about this. This would be real helpful. And we're happy to do that. So we will do our best to either get a guest in or, Mike and I can talk about it ourselves. And, sometimes it is a topic where, if we want to bring a guest in that has a little bit more specific experience, then, we've built relationships, so we can do that without a problem. But yeah. So anyhow, we will let you all go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for hanging out, and have a blessed week. Take care.
This hour of broadcasting brought to you by TwoWayRadioCenter.com, a Motorola value-added reseller. Thank you for joining the Church Safety Guys broadcast, brought to you by Vigilant Impact. We hope that you found it informative, and we appreciate your feedback and interaction. Be sure to share our broadcast with your teams, join the discussion online, and connect with us on social media. For other great ministry resources, download the Church Security app or at our website at churchsafetyguys.com. Remember, keep a servant's heart, a mindset of ministry,